Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're plunging headfirst into, well, one of the really persistent and fascinating challenges in AI. How do we actually get AI to reason?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Because when you look at the landscape now, large language models, LLMs, they just dominate the conversation, don't they?
Absolutely. They're everywhere.
And they're incredible at, generating text that sounds human, translating languages, even writing poetry.
hmm Quite impressive stuff.
But when it comes down to complex, like goal-oriented reasoning, they often just, well, hit a wall.
They do. There seems to be a kind of fundamental architectural limit there.
Right, stopping them from tackling problems that
Mm.
need that deep sort of algorithmic thinking.
Indeed. And the current workaround, people often call it a crouch, right?
Chain of thought prompting. COT.
That's the one, COTI. And well, while it's been effective, to a certain degree for some tasks, it comes with some pretty significant technical drawbacks.
Like what specific?
Well, for one, it's inherently brittle.
Hmm.
Think of it like dominoes. If one step in the generated sequence is off,
The whole thing can just fall apart.
exactly, the entire process can derail. It's also incredibly data intensive. You need tons of examples to train it well.
Right, those examples can be hard to get.
And it's slow.
Mm.
Generating all those intermediate tokens takes time, so you get high latency. Basically, these LLMs aren't truly reasoning inside. They're externalizing a sequence of reasoning steps into language.
Ah, okay. That's a really key distinction. They're writing it down, not thinking it through internally.
Precisely.
So, okay, if current LLMs are kind of shallow in their reasoning, and COT is this brittle workaround,
Mm.
what's the next step? Where do we go?
Well, that brings us to what we're diving into today, a really novel solution, the Hierarchical Reasoning Model, or HRM.
HRM. And this takes a completely different approach, right?
Brain-inspired.
Profoundly brain-inspired, yeah. It tackles this deep reasoning challenge head-on, and the results, frankly, in terms of efficiency and performance, they're pretty astonishing. So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack the technical details of HRM. We want to get into its design principles, how it tackles the limitations we just talked about.
The ones plaguing existing models.
Exactly. And what its emergence might mean for, well, the future of AI itself.
And just to be clear for everyone listening, our focus today is squarely on the engineering, the science, the technical breakthrough this model represents.
Right. We're looking at the core mechanisms, the architecture, the results.
Yep. The nuts and bolts will be steering clear of the, broader societal or ethical angles for this one. This is pure technical exploration.
A deep dive into the engineering marvel, as you put it. Okay, so we've touched on the problem, but let's really unpack the why. What is it fundamentally about how current LLMs are built that makes deep reasoning so hard for them? This seems weird, doesn't it? We call them deep learning models.
Right, but the source material calls them paradoxically shallow in terms of computational depth.
Paradoxically shallow, why?
It's a subtle point, but absolutely critical. The deep in deep learning usually refers to stacking layers, right? Information flows feed forward one layer to the next. But for transformers, that depth is fixed. Each layer processes the output of the previous one, but there's no internal recurrent computation happening over time within the model itself to really refine a solution iteratively.
So it's a fixed number of steps, essentially.
Exactly. And that fixed depth is a profound limitation. Technically speaking, standard transformers, even the massive ones, belong to these low computational complexity classes like AC0 or TC0.
Okay, complexity classes. What does that mean in practice for, someone trying to use them?
In practice, it means they're fundamentally constrained. It's like trying to solve, say, a really hard Sudoku puzzle or navigate a super complex maze using a calculator that can only do basic math for 10 steps.
It just doesn't have the capacity for that kind of deep, iterative, maybe branching thought process.
Precisely. They just aren't built for the kind of processing that true algorithmic reasoning demands.
Okay, so it's almost like you're trying to build, say, a really complex skyscraper.
Right.
That's your complex reasoning. But you've only got the ground floor to work with.
That's a great analogy, yeah. You can make that ground floor wider, add more rooms, more processing units maybe.
But not taller.
Yeah.
You can't add those crucial upper floors for the deeper, sequential, iterative stuff.
You got it. You hit that ceiling. And The paper really highlights this point well. It shows that just making a transformer wider or even stacking more layers in the traditional sense
doesn't really help for these kinds of tasks.
Right. It doesn't improve performance on things that need real computational depth, like the Sudoku extreme benchmark they use. The models saturate.
They hit a performance wall.
Yeah, because the fundamental bottleneck isn't just size, it's the architecture itself. It's not designed for that kind of deep, iterative refinement or complex search. It can't really do polynomial time computations like a Turing machine theoretically could.
Which brings us back to that crutch function chain of thought. The current best attempt to sort of simulate reasoning.
Yep. Asking the LLM to basically write down its thought process step by step in language tokens.
But you said it's brittle.
Incredibly brittle. Imagine you have a complex task broken into, say, 10 instructions. If just one of those generated instructions is slightly wrong, or maybe in the wrong order,
the whole calculation goes off the rails.
Completely. The entire reasoning process can derail, leading to totally wrong answers. It's super sensitive to tiny errors in that generated thought sequence.
And data intensive, too, you mentioned.
Hugely data intensive. To learn to generate these CUDA sequences effectively, models often need vast amounts of meticulously human-annotated training data.
Which is expensive and hard to scale.
Exactly. And finally, latency. Because it's generating all these extra tokens for the reasoning steps, often way more than the final answer itself.
It's slow. It takes time to get the answer.
Right. This whole process of externalizing into language means the LLM isn't doing internal latent reasoning. It's explicitly writing out its thoughts, which is fundamentally different and often much less efficient than how, say, our brains seem to handle deep problem solving.
That's a really interesting point. The source paper argues quite strongly that language isn't the substrate of thought itself. Why make that distinction so forcefully?
Well, the paper suggests that for us humans, language is mainly a tool for communication, for external expression.
Right, how we talk to each other.
Exactly. But our actual internal thinking, especially for complex problems or abstract reasoning, doesn't necessarily happen as a sequence of words or sentences that we then translate into an answer.
It feels more, fluid than that sometimes.
Right. The brain, the paper suggests, manages these long, coherent chains of reasoning really efficiently within its latent space, its internal, non-linguistic representations.
So COTD forces this translation step that isn't necessarily natural.
Exactly. By forcing models to translate these internal computations into explicit language tokens, COTI adds this extra layer that's inefficient, brittle, and needs loads of data.
Which is why latent reasoning, keeping the computation internal, is potentially much better.
That's the idea. Keep the computation happening within the model's hidden states without that intermediate linguistic step. That's where the efficiency gain comes from, avoiding the overhead, the brittleness, the data hunger of token-level generation for reasoning.
Getting closer to how biology seems to do it.
Trying to, yeah, keeping the complex stuff internal and optimized.
Okay, that clarifies it a lot. So if LLMs are shallow and Coach is a crutch, what's the blueprint for building this true computational depth? And this is where HRM's brain inspiration comes in.
Precisely. The human brain is the ultimate existence proof of effective computational depth.
It certainly seems to manage it.
So HRM takes direct cues from how biological computation works based on 3 fundamental principles.
Great, what are they?
First is hierarchical processing. In our brains, there's a clear division of labor. You have higher-level cortical areas, like the prefrontal cortex.
Handling the big picture stuff. Planning, goals.
Exactly. Integrating information over longer timescales, forming abstract representations. And then you have lower-level areas handling the rapid, detailed stuff, sensory input, motor control.
Like the visual cortex seeing details, right, or the motor cortex moving a finger precisely.
Right. The paper mentions studies on mouse cortex, human cortical organization. This hierarchy is pretty well established. Different regions handle different levels of detail at different speeds.
Okay, hierarchy. Different levels, different speeds. How does that link to the second principle, temporal separation?
Temporal separation is how these different levels operate at distinct speeds, or intrinsic timescales. Think about brain waves, neural rhythms.
Like alpha, gamma, theta waves.
Yeah, exactly. You have slower oscillations, like theta waves, maybe around 4-8 hertz, involved in slower, more abstract processes like memory consolidation or navigation. Then you have fast gamma waves, like 30-100 hertz, involved in rapid, detailed computations, sensory processing, attention.
So the different speeds allow for coordination.
Yes. This separation allows the stable, high-level system to guide the rapid, low-level computations. The higher level maintains the overall goal, while the lower level quickly iterates on the details within that goal.
Like a manager setting a strategy and the team executing the tasks quickly.
A good analogy. Though it's important to stress, HRM's modules are conceptual abstractions. They don't directly map one-to-one with specific brainwave frequencies. It's the functional principle of separating slow and fast processing that's the inspiration.
Got it. Functional inspiration, not direct simulation. Okay, as a third principle, recurrent connectivity.
Absolutely crucial. The brain is drenched in recurrent connections, feedback loops everywhere.
Information flowing back and forth, not just one way.
Yeah, right. And these loops allow for iterative refinement of internal representations. The brain can revisit and update its understanding continuously. And critically, it does this without the huge credit assignment costs that plague artificial networks trained with backpropagation through time, or BPTT.
BPTT. The standard way to train recurrent networks, but it's notoriously heavy, right?
Very memory intensive. It needs to store the entire history of activations to calculate gradients. That's computationally expensive and, frankly, biologically implausible. The brain doesn't seem to work that way.
So HRM aims to mimic the brain's efficient iterative refinement using recurrence, but without the heavy cost of BPTT.
That's the goal. Continuous internal dialogue and refinement, but trained efficiently.
Okay, so let's dive into the HRM architecture itself. How does it actually implement these principles? You mentioned 2 core modules.
That's right. At its heart, HRM has 2 interdependent recurrent modules. There's a high-level module, let's call it H, for the abstract, deliberate reasoning, the slow part, and a low-level module, L, for the fast, detailed computations.
H for high level, L for low level. Makes sense. How do they interact?
It's a really neat dynamic. The L module updates its state based on its own previous state, the input data, and the current state of the H module. But here's the key. The H module's state remains fixed while the L module runs through its cycle.
So H sets the context and L works within that fixed context.
Exactly. Think of H setting the strategy or the current subgoal. Then L iterates rapidly, maybe hundreds of times, doing the detailed calculations needed for that subgoal, all while H holds steady. Only after L finishes its rapid computations does H update its own state. It takes the final output from L and uses that to refine its higher-level understanding or adjust the strategy for the next big step.
So it's like H thinks, tells L what to do, L does it fast, reports back, then H thinks again based on the report. A nested process.
Good process, yeah. A loop within a loop. And the entire sequence, say, n high-level cycles, each containing t low-level time steps, constitutes just a single forward pass through the network.
A single forward pass. That's very different from CoT, which is multiple passes generating tokens.
Fundamentally different. And this is where the efficiency comes in. The paper highlights this, just 27 million parameters. That's tiny compared to most LLMs.
Tiny. And it achieves great results on complex tasks with only, 1,000 training samples?
Roughly, yeah. And crucially, without needing massive pre-training or specific CoT data.
That is a huge efficiency gain. It's doing more with vastly less.
It really is. This nested, iterative computation, all within one forward pass, gives it that computational depth without needing billions of parameters or zettabytes of data. It's a lean approach to complex thought.
Okay, but standard RNNs often have this problem called early convergence, right? They sort of settle down too quickly and stop computing effectively. Does HRM face that?
That's a classic RNN problem, and HRM has a specific mechanism to tackle it called hierarchical convergence.
Hierarchical convergence, how did that work?
Instead of the whole network settling into one final state too quickly, HRM allows the L module to converge to a local equilibrium within each H cycle. Remember, H is holding steady during that cycle.
Right, providing stable guidance.
So L finds the best solution it can under that specific guidance. Then, when H updates, it effectively resets the context for L. It gives L a new target equilibrium to converge towards in the next cycle.
So each H step kicks off a new round of L computation towards a new goal.
Precisely. This allows for a sequence of distinct, stable, nested computations over many, many steps. It's like the thought process keeps re-energizing itself, preventing it from stalling out in some shallow state.
That sounds much more dynamic.
It is. Figure 3 in the paper shows this really well. HRM maintains high computational activity, what they call the forward residual, for way longer than standard RNNs whose activity just decays quickly.
And that translates directly to better performance, especially on tasks needing depth.
Directly. As shown in Figure 2, HRM keeps improving where transformers just plateau. It keeps thinking deeper without getting stuck.
Super elegant. But, okay, you mentioned the problem with training recurrent models, BPTT being memory hungry. How does HRM get around that for training?
Right. BPTT is the bane of deep recurrent networks. Storing all of those intermediate states chews up memory, limits batch sizes, slows down training, and it's just not how brains seem to learn.
So what's HRM's trick?
It uses a one-step gradient approximation. This is really clever. Instead of unrolling the entire sequence of states back through time.
Which requires remembering everything.
Exactly. It basically applies backpropagation in a single step right at the equilibrium point reached by each module.
Just at the end state of the computation.
Effectively, yes. It calculates the gradient based on that stable end state. This cuts the memory footprint down from OT, proportional to the sequence length, to an amazing O1, constant memory usage, regardless of how many steps it takes.
O1 memory. That's huge for scalability.
It's a game changer for training deep recurrent models.
Yeah.
And it also feels more biologically plausible, right? Like learning based on the immediate outcome, not some perfect replay of the entire thought process.
Yeah, that makes intuitive sense. Is there some complex math behind how that approximation works?
There is. It's grounded in the theory of deep equilibrium models, or DEQ. These models use something called the implicit function theorem, IFT.
Okay, implicit function theorem. Sounds heavy.
It is, but the essence is that IFT provides a mathematical shortcut. It lets you calculate the gradient directly from the final stable state of the system without needing to explicitly compute and store all the intermediate steps.
A mathematical magic trick.
Sort of. Now, calculating the exact gradient using IFT can still involve a tricky matrix inversion, which can be slow. The one-step approximation simplifies this further by basically taking just the first most significant term of a mathematical series used to estimate that inverse.
So it's an efficient approximation of an already clever shortcut.
Pretty much. It makes the gradient calculation fast and memory light, relying only on local information at the equilibrium point. It's a really elegant solution to a very old problem.
Okay, so we have the core architecture, the efficient training. What about these advanced mechanisms mentioned, like deep supervision? What's that about?
Deep supervision is another technique to improve training, again with a nod to biology, inspired by how things like neural oscillations might regulate when learning happens in the brain, providing timely feedback.
So more frequent feedback during the reasoning process.
Exactly. In HRM, instead of just calculating the loss and updating weights at the very end of a potentially long reasoning sequence, deep supervision breaks the process into multiple segments.
Shorter chunks.
Right. You run the model for a segment, calculate a loss based on the prediction at that point, update the parameters. Then, crucially, you take the final hidden state from that segment, detach it from the computation graph.
Detach it. Why?
Detaching it means gradients from the next segment won't flow back through the previous ones. This stops gradients from accumulating and potentially exploding or vanishing over very long sequences. It keeps the updates focused and stable.
Ah, okay. So it provides more frequent updates to the H module, helping it learn its high-level strategy better.
Precisely. More frequent feedback, more stable gradients. It also acts as a nice regularization method, improving overall performance.
Makes sense. And then there's adaptive computational time, or ACT. This sounds like the model can decide how long to think.
Yeah, this is really cool. It connects to that idea of thinking fast and slow. ACT allows HRM to dynamically adjust how many of those segments it runs for any given problem.
So it doesn't always run for the maximum time.
Nope. It learns to be efficient. It uses the deep supervision framework, but adds a Q learning component.
Q learning, like from reinforcement learning.
Kind of. A special Q head looks at the H module state at the end of a segment and predicts the value of two actions, halt or continue.
So it asks itself, should I stop thinking now or keep going?
Basically, yeah. If the predicted value of halting is higher than continuing, or if it hits a preset maximum number of segments, it stops and gives the answer.
How does it learn to make good stopping decisions?
During training, the loss function combines the usual prediction accuracy loss with a loss for the Q head. So it's learning both to get the right answer and to stop at the right time. There's also a bit of randomness during training to encourage it to sometimes explore longer thinking times, so it doesn't get stuck always stopping too early on hard problems.
That's smart. And the payoff is efficiency, right? Figure 5 in the paper shows this.
Huge payoff. Figure 5 shows ACT models use substantially fewer computational steps on average, but achieve pretty much the same performance as models forced to run for a fixed maximum time.
So it saves compute, saves energy, gets answers faster when possible.
Exactly. Big win for practical deployment. And there's another related benefit, inference time scaling.
Inference time scaling.
Yeah. Because of how ACT works, you can train an HRM model, and then at inference time, when you're actually using it, you can just increase its maximum allowed computation time.
Without retraining.
Without any retraining or changes. If you encounter a harder problem, you just tell the model, okay, you can think for longer now. And often, its performance will improve.
Wow. So you can dial up the reasoning power on demand.
To some extent, yes. The paper shows this works really well for tasks like Sudoku, where more iterative refinement clearly helps. For something like ARC-AGI, where the solution might involve fewer steps, the benefit of extra time is less pronounced, but the capability is there.
That's incredibly flexible. Now, you mentioned Q-learning can sometimes be unstable. People often use things like replay buffers or target networks to stabilize it. How does HRM manage ACT stability without those?
Good question. It seems to come down to the core HRM architecture and the specific training setup. The paper credits the use of a post-norm architecture with RMS norm.
Okay, specific normalization techniques.
Right. RMS norm is a type of layer normalization applied after the main computations in a layer. That, combined with the Atom W optimizer, seems to keep the model parameters well-behaved and bounded.
Bounded parameters are key.
Apparently so. There's some theories suggesting Q-learning converges nicely if the network parameters don't explode, and using things like RMS norm and Atom W, which has implicit weight decay, helps ensure that. So the inherent stability of the model setup avoids the need for those extra stabilization tricks.
Making it simpler and more elegant again. Okay, let's talk benchmarks. Where did HRM really prove its mettle? The paper used 3 really tough reasoning tasks.
Yeah, they threw down the gauntlet with these. First was the ARC-AGI challenge. ARC stands for Abstraction and Reasoning Corpus.
IQ tests like puzzles, right?
Exactly. They require genuine inductive reasoning. You see a few input-output examples, and you have to figure out the underlying abstract rule and apply it to a new input. It's tough for standard deep learning, even with CoT.
And they use ARC-AGI too.
Yes, which emphasizes even deeper stuff. Compositional reasoning, multi-step logic, understanding context, symbolic abstraction, really about generalizing from very few examples.
Okay, challenge number 1, abstract rule induction. What's next?
Sudoku extreme, and they mean extreme. These aren't the ones you breeze through in the newspaper.
Okay, how extreme?
9x9 puzzles, but specifically chosen because they require extensive tree search and backtracking, the kind where you have to try a number, follow the implications, realize it leads to a contradiction, and then carefully undo your steps and try something else.
The really hard ones.
Yeah. The data set they compiled averages 22 backtracks per puzzle for a human solver. That's significantly harder than typical Sudoku data sets. It really tests deep, iterative search.
Wow, 22 backtracks.
Okay.
And the third benchmark?
Maze hard. Finding the shortest path in complex 30 by 30 mazes. The shortest paths here are often over 110 steps long.
So again, requiring long-range planning and search in a complex space.
Exactly. Planning, navigation, maintaining a strategy over many steps.
Okay, the gauntlet is set. How did HRM actually do? Figure 1 summarizes the results, right?
And the results are, well, pretty striking, especially given HRM's small size. On ARC-AGI, HRM just 27M parameters, trained on only about 1,000 examples, hit 40.3% accuracy.
How did that compare?
Significantly better than much larger CoT models, like O3 Mini-High got 34.5%, and Claude 3.7 with 8K context, which is vastly bigger, only got 21.2%.
So HRM is learning abstract rules way more efficiently from less data.
Seems so. Without needing massive pre-training or CoT data, that's a huge leap in data efficiency for abstract reasoning.
Okay, that's impressive. What about Sudoku and Maze, where you said CoT models just failed?
Yeah, this is where the difference becomes stark. On Sudoku Extreme and Maze Hard, HRM achieved nearly perfect accuracy.
Nearly perfect.
Right.
While CoT got 0.
0% accuracy for the state-of-the-art CoT methods tested. It's not even close. It really highlights that fundamental architectural limit of the fixed-depth transformers for these kinds of search-heavy, deep reasoning tasks.
And they compared it to a standard transformer the same size too, right? The direct pred baseline.
They did. And that baseline, a vanilla transformer with the same training setup and size as HRM, did much worse or failed completely.
So it's definitely the architecture making the difference.
It really seems to be. They also mentioned another data point. A much larger 175M parameter transformer, trained on 1 million examples, still got less than 20% on the 30 by 30 maze tasks. Just scaling up doesn't solve it. HRM's design is the key.
Really drives home that point about shallow computation in standard models. Did they use any data augmentation to help HRM learn?
Yes, they did use some standard augmentation techniques to effectively expand the dataset from those few unique examples. For ARC, things like translating, rotating, flipping, changing colors in the puzzles.
Standard image-like augmentations.
Right. For Sudoku, they used band and digit permutations, swapping rows columns within blocks, or just relabeling the digits 1 through 9. They didn't use augmentation for maze, though.
So augmentation helps stretch the data, but the core learning ability comes from the architecture.
That seems to be the case. The architecture allows it to discover and implement the actual algorithms needed, not just memorize patterns from augmented data.
Okay, now for maybe the most intriguing part. Trying to understand what HRM is actually doing inside, peeking into the black box. How does it solve these problems? What reasoning algorithms does it learn?
Yeah, the interpretability question. Always fascinating, always challenging. The researchers used a visualization method, shown in Figure 7. They basically decoded intermediate predictions from the hidden state of the high-level H module at different time steps during the problem-solving process.
So trying to see the H module's plan as it evolves.
Kind of like that, yeah. Like watching its thinking unfold step by step.
And what did they see? Did it use the same strategy for all tasks?
Interestingly, no. It adapted. For Maze Hard, the visualizations suggested it starts by exploring multiple paths at once, like a broad initial search.
Casting a wide net.
Right. Then, over iterations, it prunes the bad paths, starts outlining a potential solution, and refines it until it finds the optimal one. You can see the predicted path, blue cells, becoming clearer over time.
Okay, a multi-path exploration and refinement strategy. What about Sudoku?
For Sudoku Extreme, the strategy looked remarkably like a depth-first search.
Like the classic algorithm.
Very much so. The model seemed to explore potential number placements, follow them through, and if it hit a dead end or a rule violation.
Backtrack.
Exactly. It would backtrack and try a different path. The visualizations in Figure 7, with colors highlighting violations and changes, make this trial and error backtracking process pretty clear.
That's amazing. It essentially rediscovered depth-first search on its own.
It certainly appears to have learned a strategy that functionally mimics it very closely.
And for the RC-AGI puzzles, was it backtracking there too?
Less so, apparently. For RC-AGI 2, the solution showed more consistent progression, something more akin to hill climbing optimization.
Hill climbing, meaning?
Meaning, it seemed to make small, incremental adjustments to the puzzle grid, step by step, gradually improving it towards the target solution, rather than doing deep searches and backtracking.
So different strategies for different types of problems. That suggests flexibility.
Definitely. It suggests the model can adapt to different reasoning approaches, likely choosing an effective strategy for each particular task. It's not just applying one fixed algorithm.
But the paper also says further research is needed to really understand these strategies, right? What makes them hard to fully interpret?
Well, the main challenge is the complexity of that H module's hidden state. It's a high-dimensional vector space. We can decode predictions from it, like seeing the current maze path or Sudoku grid.
Seeing the what?
Right. But understanding the why, the precise sequence of internal computations, the specific features it's tracking, why it decided to backtrack now versus continuing, that's much harder. It's not like the model writes out its algorithmic plan in English for us.
It's still operating in that latent space.
Exactly. So fully mapping that latent activity onto human understandable algorithms is a major research challenge. We see the behavior looks like DFS or hill climbing, but the exact internal implementation could be quite nuanced.
And why is getting that deeper interpretability so important for AI development?
Oh, for many reasons. First, trust and safety. If we deploy these models for critical tasks, we need to understand how they reach conclusions, not just that they get the right answer sometimes. Debugging is another. If it makes a mistake, how do we fix it if we don't understand its process?
Right.
And beyond that, there's the potential for discovery. If AI finds a novel, efficient way to solve a problem, understanding its algorithm could teach us something new. Plus, it helps bridge the gap to neuroscience, comparing learned AI strategies to how brains solve problems. Without deeper interpretability, we're limited in our ability to systematically improve, control, and learn from these powerful models.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, shifting gears slightly, but staying with the brain connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's talk about brain correspondence and this idea of an emergent dimensionality hierarchy in HRM.
Yeah, this is another really fascinating finding. It starts with a principle from neuroscience
Which is?
that a brain region's functional complexity, its ability to handle diverse tasks, correlates with the dimensionality of its neural representations. Higher order areas doing more complex stuff.
Like the prefrontal cortex doing planning.
Right. They tend to operate in higher dimensional neural spaces.
Higher dimensionality means more complex patterns of activity are possible.
Essentially, yes. It's measured using something called the participation ratio, PR. A high PR means the activity variance is spread out across many dimensions. The system is flexible, can represent many different states or concepts distinctly. A low PR means activity is confined to fewer dimensions, more specialized, maybe more rigid.
Like an orchestra versus a flute, you said earlier.
Exactly.
Right.
And the biological evidence supports this. The paper cites studies showing PR increases as you go from lower-level sensory areas to higher-level association areas in the mouse cortex. Figure 8A and 8B show this hierarchy visually.
Okay, so higher brain areas, higher dimensionality. And the big news is HRM reproduces this.
It does. They measured the PR for HRM's low-level ZL and high-level ZH modules. The numbers are in figure 8C and 8 pins.
Yeah,
ZL, the low-level module, has a PR of about 30, relatively low-dimensional focused. But ZH, the high-level module, has a PR of almost 90.
Wow, nearly 3 times higher.
Yeah, a clear dimensionality hierarchy mirroring the brain. And what's more, figure 8D shows that ZH's dimensionality actually increases as it's exposed to more diverse tasks, like different Sudoku solution paths, while ZL's stay stable.
So the high-level module becomes representationally richer as the problems get more varied. That sounds adaptive.
Highly adaptive, exactly what you'd want for flexible reasoning.
And this wasn't hard-coded, right? The paper says it's an emergent property of training.
Crucially, yes. They confirmed this with a control experiment. They took an untrained HRM with random weights.
And measured its PR.
Yep. And in the untrained network, figure 8E, both modules had low similar PRs, around 40, and neither scaled with test diversity.
So the hierarchy only appears after the model learns to solve the reasoning tasks.
Exactly. It discovers this organizational principle on its own. It's not just an artifact of the architecture, it's learned.
And the ratio between high and low PR in HRM is actually pretty close to the mouse cortex.
It is. HRM's ratio, ZHCL, is about 2.98. The mouse cortex ratio they cite is about 2.25. It's in the same ballpark.
And this is important because it avoids the collapse pattern seen in typical deep networks. What's that collapse?
Neural collapse is this phenomenon where, especially in the final layers of standard deep networks, the learned features tend to converge into a very low-dimensional space. They lose richness and nuance.
Like everything gets flattened out.
Kind of. It limits flexibility. HRM, by maintaining this high-dimensional representation in its H module, avoids that collapse. And that high dimensionality is thought to be crucial for cognitive flexibility. It's characteristic of brain areas like the prefrontal cortex that are vital for complex reasoning.
So HRM seems to have stumbled upon, or learned, a fundamental organizational principle for flexible thought.
It strongly suggests that, yes, it learns to partition its internal representations into these functionally specialized modules with different dimensionalities, much like the brain seems to do.
But again, the paper notes this is correlational evidence, right? Showing the link exists but not proving causality.
Correct. Demonstrating that manipulating, say, the H module's dimensionality causes a specific deficit in reasoning is tricky in these complex models.
Because the manipulation might mess up training in other ways.
Exactly. It's hard to isolate the effect purely to the dimensionality change without confounding effects on the learning process itself. Establishing that clean causal link via intervention is a key challenge for future interpretability research in deep learning.
Makes sense.
Yeah?
Okay, let's situate HRM in the bigger picture. Where does it fit in the history of AI trying to learn algorithms? Models like neural Turing machines, universal transformers.
Yeah, it definitely builds on that lineage. People have been trying to get neural nets to learn algorithms for a while. Neural Turing machines tried adding external memory. Neural GPUs tried mimicking hardware. Universal transformers introduced recurrence over layers.
So HRM is the latest step in that quest. How does it push things forward?
The paper argues it further pushes the boundary of algorithm learning through its exceptional data efficiency and model expressiveness. Many earlier models were maybe limited to simpler algorithms or needed very specific hand-designed components. HRM seems to discover quite complex, diverse algorithms, like search and backtracking from very few examples.
Learning sophisticated algorithms more generally and efficiently from data.
That seems to be the key advance.
And this connects back to Turing completeness. Standard transformers fall short, you said.
Well,
How does
fair.
HRM get closer to practical Turing completeness?
Right, so theoretically, models like the universal transformer and HRM2 are computationally universal, if given enough time and memory. They can simulate any Turing machine.
In theory.
In theory. But the practical limitation for earlier recurrent algorithm learners was often that premature convergence, they stopped thinking too soon, and the memory cost of DPTT, which limited how long a reasoning chain they could actually handle during training and inference.
So they couldn't realize their theoretical potential.
Not easily. By solving those two key problems, using hierarchical convergence to avoid stalling, and the O1 memory gradient to train long sequences efficiently, HRM makes it practical to train on and execute long reasoning processes. It can handle the intensive depth-first search and backtracking needed for Sudoku Extreme, for example. This moves it much closer to practical Turing completeness.
Which could unlock new capabilities for AI.
Huge potential. If AI can reliably learn and execute arbitrary algorithms, it moves beyond pattern matching or text generation. It could tackle problems requiring deep symbolic manipulation.
Like what kind of applications?
Imagine AI contributing to scientific discovery, not just analyzing data, but maybe designing simulations, interpreting results, forming hypotheses iteratively, or generating complex verified software from high-level descriptions, or enabling robots to perform truly complex long-term planning in dynamic environments.
Things that require genuine, flexible, multi-step problem solving.
Exactly. Moving from statistical correlation towards actual algorithmic understanding, it's a fundamental step towards more general AI.
Okay, one last comparison. How does HRM stack up against using reinforcement learning for chain of thought, or things like linear attention?
Good question. RL for CoT is being explored, but the source suggests RL often just unlocks existing CoT-like capabilities that are already latent in the LLM. It doesn't necessarily discover fundamentally new reasoning mechanisms from scratch like HRM seems to.
And RL can be unstable and data hungry for this?
Notoriously so. It relies on sparse rewards, just getting the final answer right or wrong, making learning inefficient. HRM uses dense gradient-based supervision from the deep supervision mechanism, which is much more stable and data efficient for learning the reasoning process.
So different learning paradigms. And linear attention, that's about efficiency for long text, right?
Precisely. Linear attention tackles the quadratic cost of standard transformer attention, making it scale better to very long sequences. It's an efficiency optimization.
But it doesn't fix the shallow computation problem.
No, it doesn't address the fundamental fixed depth limitation that necessitates CoT in the first place. Linear attention models are still typically feed-forward. HRM's focus is entirely different. It's about achieving true computational depth through its hierarchical, recurrent, multi-timescale architecture. It's tackling the reasoning depth problem head-on, not just optimizing token processing for long contexts.
A fundamentally different approach to the reasoning challenge itself.
Exactly.
This has been incredibly insightful. So to quickly recap the core breakthrough here, HRM uses this brain-inspired design, the dual H&L modules working at different timescales.
Achieving substantial computational depth.
Doing it efficiently, without sacrificing training stability, using clever tricks like hierarchical convergence and the one-step gradient.
Right. And the results speak for themselves. Remarkable performance on really tough reasoning tasks like ARC, Sudoku Extreme, Maze Hard.
Especially given its tiny size, 27 million parameters, and minimal training data, maybe just 1,000 examples per task.
Which just blows away huge LLMs using CoT on these specific types of problems. It really underscores the power of the architecture for deep reasoning.
And it challenges the dominant paradigm, doesn't it? While most of the field focuses on scaling up these big, non-hierarchical models.
HRM proposes a fundamentally different path. It suggests this hierarchical, brain-inspired approach is a really viable alternative, maybe even superior for genuine reasoning, moving beyond just mimicking thought patterns with CoT.
It's presented as potentially a foundational framework capable of Turing-complete universal computation.
Which is a huge claim, but the evidence suggests it's a significant step in that direction towards AI that can truly understand, discover algorithms, and solve complex problems flexibly.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Our own brains rely so heavily on hierarchical structures, different processing speeds, recurrence, all these things HRM tries to capture. As AI models like HRM get better at emulating these deep biological reasoning mechanisms, how might that change our understanding of our own thought processes? Could building AI that truly reasons teach us more about how we reason?
A fascinating question to ponder. The synergy between AI and neuroscience might just be entering a whole new phase.